Hello, everybody. I am Jocelyn Pepe. I am the Vice Chair of the Wellness Coaching Initiative, along with Ellen. I am here today looking forward to having a conversation with all of you about menopause and mental health. Today, I bring the perspective of a mental health expert. I have my master's in the psychology and neuroscience of mental health and am a registered health coach and a PCC level coach with the International Coaching Federation. And I am delighted to be having this conversation with you today, Ellen, and I will let you introduce yourself.
Thanks so much, Jocelyn. Yes, I am the chair for the Global Wellness Institute Wellness Coaching Initiative. Jocelyn and I have had the advantage of work together for the past 3 years. And Jocelyn actually reached out today to talk about this. I am a menopause expert. I'm a health and wellness coach, ICF Master Certified Coach, National Board for Health and Wellness Coaching Certified Coach with a master's degree in workplace well-being. So we really wanted to have this conversation about the 5 most prevalent questions that come to us about menopause. And we really want to take the two angles. I'll be taking the health and wellness menopause expert angle, and Jocelyn will be taking the mental health angle. So Jocelyn, why don't you start with the very first question that's come along our way?
Yeah, thanks, Ellen. So we have a series of questions that we hear quite often. And as Ellen said, I got into this because I had friends coming to me with symptoms and they were all mental health related. So the first question that we hear quite often is, how does menopause impact mental health? And why do psychological symptoms appear during this phase? And so, what I want to articulate is that there are two things that are really important to pay attention here. First of all, there's somatic symptoms that are below the neck symptoms. And then there's neurological symptoms, which are above the neck symptoms. And we're going to have a conversation today about both of those because both of them are incredibly important. And so, why do these psychological symptoms appear during this phase of life is where I'll start with, and then how it impacts mental health. So, the reason that there's this experience of psychological effects is because there's a decrease in estrogens, and in the brain, we call it estradiol. And so that is in the brain, a master regulator of the female brain, which is imperative for brain health. And during this time of life, there are hormonal changes that impact that brain chemistry, affecting mood and emotional regulation. And so, with those estrogen levels naturally declining or naturally being out of sync, it creates a higher risk of mood disturbances because estradiol actually works with serotonin, it works with GABA, it works with dopamine. And so when those three neurotransmitters are out of sync and estrogen is out of sync, it can lead to increased anxiety, higher levels of depression, and a lot of emotional irritability.
Mhm.
So there's a real connectivity between stress, which is cortisol, estrogen, and mood. And
Mhm.
so that's kind of where I've approached our conversation from and the impacts on mental health. Ellen, what would you add from your
That is,
perspective?
yeah, and it's the question is the same. We both agreed this is a really common question. First of all, I think it's interesting to look at a little bit of data. Between 60 and 70% of women represent this kind of psychological symptoms. So that's the first thing. What often happens is they get this feeling of guilt, like they shouldn't have these symptoms. So I think
Mm.
here we're giving you permission to have these symptoms. It is a physiological thing. Now, you've been talking about the mental health. Let's talk about the physical side that's related to the mental health. And Jocelyn, I really appreciate that you linked it to stress
Mm.
because the menopause in and of itself is a stressor on the female body, which means that cortisol will be going up. And we've heard this mentioned now. We've heard cortisol, you've heard estrogen, progesterone. These hormones are like a cocktail party going on in your body. And as long as they're balanced, it's delicious. When they are imbalanced, it creates imbalances all over. So first of all, recognizing that there are mental health issues that can arise very, very naturally. And then to understand that we can actually really manage a lot of them with physical lifestyle, because there are certain things we can do with our food, our physical activity, and our sleep that affect those very same hormones. So again, we'll be looking at that as we go down a little bit further, but we can do a lot with our physical lifestyle, and we'll get into details later, that can actually alleviate anxiety, mood swings, and irritability. So, is there anything else you'd like to add to that question, Jocelyn? I think we've done a pretty good job covering that one.
Yeah, I think we've given a good overview of the reason why those psychological symptoms occur. That's that the stress, the mood, and the
Yeah,
estradiol.
the
So
hormone swings, the ups and
yeah.
downs. So, a second question we've gotten very, very often is how can a woman actually reduce hormone related stress? So, we've put it together, hormone related stress. And I think I'll start with that one because one of the easiest ways to do it is through nutrition. There
Mm,
are certain hormone balancing diets which are rich in whole food, rich in omega 3s, rich in fiber, low in sugar. Sugar
mm,
is the number one driver of cortisol, which is our stress hormone. Physical activity, in case the cortisol is up, helps reduce as well that cortisol imbalance. And finally, consistent sleep hygiene. And the
mm,
only thing that I would like to add to that is not to think of these individual lifestyle changes in a silo, because nutrition affects activity, which affects sleep, which affects nutrition, which affects sleep, which so there it's almost like the gears of a watch that need to work together. What would you
mm.
add, Jocelyn?
Yeah, I love that. It's so interconnected, and that's what I love about a whole person approach to hormone related stress during menopause. So I love what you talked about in terms of diet. What I would add in a little bit more detail is really with that diet focusing on foods that are estrogen providing if your estrogen levels are dipping or lower. So that could come from edamame and those phytoestrogen type foods. It could come in flax seeds. It could come in plant-based proteins like legumes. So there's lots of ways to really work with the diet. Um, with the psychological stress, it's really asking for help too. So those um, working with a coach in this way, when we'll talk about this a little bit later, hormone related stress can also come from external experiences. So I think, Ellen, you had talked a lot about some of the internal things. But when we think about hormone related stress and an increase in cortisol, which can then be impacted by the estradiol, is our social networks. Our healthy relationships. I've read a lot of research about the differing relationships through this lifetime for women. And so really trying to balance stress from that perspective of those external relationships that also can be around incorporated into that whole approach you talked about, like diet, exercise, and the sleep hygiene. So
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm,
this is a
mm-hmm.
time of life where so many women have multiple caregiving responsibilities, whether it's children, parents. It's also a time of change for relationships in terms of whether it's marriages or other types of relationships. So making sure that you're asking for help and approaching this time from some of those external as well as internal balances.
And by the way, the things that you just mentioned are also keys to general longevity.
Mm,
The number one driver of a long, healthy life, not just a long life, we want a long, healthy life. We want to add life to years and not just years to life, in the words of David Katz, Dr. David Katz. Longevity is based on relationships. So
mm.
as we can improve these relationships, yes, it will improve our symptoms, but it will also give us a longer, healthier life.
Yeah, what I love about that is everything we're talking about is that whether it's looking at a Mediterranean style of eating or the relationships, in general, a lot of things, and it can be tailored specifically during menopause. It's about living a healthy, really healthy lifestyle
Mhm.
for high quality of life.
Mm, mm. Yes, and
Mm.
we'll get deeper into that with our next questions. Why don't you go for the next one, Joss?
Yeah, so the next question that we hear a lot about is what basic lifestyle changes can help manage the emotional ups and downs of menopause? And so lifestyle changes. I came at this from a perspective of focusing on the pillars of well being: physical, mental, emotional, social, and spiritual. And so, when we're looking at the physical well being to manage the emotional ups and downs of menopause, walking, weights, yoga, or whatever your type of exercise that isn't increasing cortisol in your body or causing higher levels of stress for what you're able to achieve in your day. And so that helps boost the serotonin and dopamine levels that are already um, engaging with the decrease in the estradiol in the brain as well. You've already talked about those phytoestrogens, and we've talked a little bit about it, but those foods include flax seeds, soy products, sesame seeds,
Hmm.
legumes, and
Exactly.
foods that include apricots and peaches. Emotional well-being, name it to tame it. I feel like a lot of the psychological impact in the emotional ups and downs is could be anger, agitation, depression, and like you had talked about earlier, wanting to like feeling shame or guilt around it or feeling isolated around it. And so I think that name it to tame it is really important. Um, because a lot of the discomfort and the emotions is like not feeling it, not wanting to feel what your body's actually doing, whether it's heart palpitations or
Mhm.
sadness or anger. It's really naming it and having someone to support you through that emotional regulation.
I love that, Jocelyn. Thanks so much for saying it. And if you're not aware of Name It to Tame It and what that's all about, it's about finding the right word of how you feel. And that would be an invitation already for everybody to, it's always a useful invitation to actually think about how you feel, not embodying, I am stressed, I am sad, but I notice I'm feeling stressed. I notice I'm feeling sad. And is it sad or is it disappointed? Is it disappointed or is it frustrated? Because you will
Mm-hmm.
manage it very differently depending on the granularity of that word. So moving on from that, we're on this question of what are some lifestyle changes. I do love the first one that you said, which is actually recognizing and naming our emotions. I would go one step further with that, and I would say to speak about it, to actually stop the taboo. I would speak with younger women, older women, younger men, and older men. This is a general consensus lifestyle transition that every single woman will go through. And by the
Mm-hmm.
way, men will also go through andropause, which is a little bit less extreme, but we will have transitions in our life where our hormones are up and down. Lifestyle is about getting those hormones as balanced as possible where we can manage them. If we cannot manage them because we're transitioning with menopause, we'll manage them through nutrition, activity, and sleep. One thing I did want to talk about here is the famous weight gain. For
Mm-hmm.
years, I was been a weight loss coach, nutrition coach. 99% of the women that come to me during menopause say, I'm menopausal, therefore I'm gaining weight. And I want to clear that up a little bit. Hormonal changes do not cause weight gain, period. Clear. End of story. Hormonal changes do not cause weight gain, but aging, lifestyle, and genetics can.
Mm-hmm.
We often get increased belly fat and a different distribution of the weight. And our basal metabolic rate, the rate at which we burn calories, goes down. Now, if you're in tune with yourself and you're eating when you're hungry and you're stopping when you're full, you should be able to pretty much maintain your weight, especially if you keep your muscle mass up. Your muscle mass will decline. Your muscle mass burns more calories. So it's important through these menopausal years, not just eat right, sleep right, move right. We need to increase our muscle mass because it decreases at an increasing rate as of the menopause. Otherwise, we need to cut out about 200 calories per day.
Mm.
Average weight gain for a menopausal woman is 3 pounds. So everybody can actually be happy and live with 3 pounds extra as well. It is not a major thing. But keep in mind, when we don't sleep well, we tend to gain weight. When we don't eat well, we tend to gain weight. When we don't move our bodies, we tend to gain weight. And gaining weight is also a stressor on the body. So you can see how, again, these imbalances need to all be incorporated into our general lifestyle decisions. So moving on, like especially in the workplace, I think this is super important. How can women maintain a sense of identity and purpose during menopause? I really see this happening at work because a lot of women actually quit the workplace at
Mm.
menopause age. And it is an age where women often have the highest stress positions of their life, often, and we fought for it, right? We are half of the workforce today, more and more women leaders. But around 45 to 55, which is the average tranche for menopause, is when women are usually squeezed. They're sandwiched between aging parents, children leaving home, the relationships you spoke about, Jocelyn, and
Mm.
work stress. So very often, women will choose to leave the workplace or be frustrated or not feel well, which relates to performance. So what I would say is let's get these self-care routines in place so that we don't have to leave the workplace and have the other issues to deal with. What about on the mental health side, Joss?
I love that, maintaining the purpose and identity. A lot of the research I have been looking into is our mindset and our perspective around menopause, especially, like you said, we women want to have this level of purpose and impact in the world through their career. And so, having an opportunity to reframe this, phase in life as a time of decline to a time of transformation with opportunity to step further into our power, into our wisdom, into our new identity that's evolving. And from a biological perspective, and looking at different ways that this has been navigated throughout time, um, this transition really into what is technically grandmotherhood, and you and I were just talking about
Mm-hmm.
this, is a time for renewed, wisdom. It's a time to share what we have learned to this point with the world. It's a time of increased energy post menopause, even, and increased impact and increased, quality of life. And so, just having the opportunity to embrace this, phase of
Positively.
openness, and rather approach it with openness and welcoming versus resistance and dread,
Yes.
that can be the key to really like unlocking your potential and purpose throughout this time of life. And it's an also, as you mentioned, if we're taking care of our health and all the pillars of well-being, looking at this as another opportunity to really invest in yourself, like really double down on taking care of yourself. So if you are a woman who has had children, you have had so much energy output. This is a time where you can really focus on energy input, whether it's your somatic, as we talked about, below the neck, or your neurological above the neck. Bottom line is it's your overall health, whether it's your brain or your body.
Fantastic, fantastic advice. And I just would mention before we go to our fifth and final question that hormone replacement therapy, if all else fails, hormone
Mhm.
replacement therapy is an absolutely valid solution. Of course, we would invite you to see your medical practitioner, but we sometimes can only do so much with lifestyle, and we may want to balance our hormones with HRT. I just thought that was worth mentioning, Joss.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's actually beautiful because that leads into how health coaches can support women going through menopause and
Yeah.
mental health. And this is the perspective that you and I are both coming. And what I love about what you've just shared in HRT, because we have talked a lot about lifestyle, is the role that coaching can play in really offering, that bio individual, support for mental health. No two women are going to go through menopause in the same way. although they'll have similarities in symptoms, every woman is going to have a different experience from their bio-individual nature. And so health coaches can support with that non-biased, non-judgmental respect for the diversity of each woman's choice, and that there is no such thing as one size fits all.
Oh, it is so well said, Jocelyn. I could just hug you for that. So you've really taken the approach of the health and wellness coach on an individual basis.
Mhm.
I'm gonna pull back from that and I'm gonna look at the workplace. I
Beautiful.
personally was approached about 7 years ago by a male HR director that said he wanted to develop menopause programs. So I immediately created menopause programs for the workplace where I invite every age, every gender, so that we're in this space and we have awareness and we talk about it and we discuss. Recently, a young man came into the room and he said, I've got to understand my female boss. I want to know what's happening there. Everybody's got a mother, a sister, a girlfriend, a boss, a colleague. 100% of women, 50% of the workforce will be going through this. This is a general diversity, equity, and inclusion conversation, not only a health and well-being conversation. Let's break the taboo. Let's open up the conversation. Health and wellness coaches can run group programs and individual coaching for employers. So, Joss, I think we've really done a great tour here, and I hope that people get something out of it and they can reach out to either of us at any time for more support or takeaways.
Beautiful. Well, thank you for this conversation. I look forward to diving further into it as we continue our journey. And for those of you listening, we look forward to hearing from you if this is of interest for you as an individual or from a workplace health and well-being perspective.
Yeah, thanks for showing up and thanks for the great idea, Jocelyn.
Yeah, thank you for the collaboration.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.